The name on her boarding pass was too clear to ignore. I wasn't trying to look. I was just standing there at gate C14 at Calgary International, holding a coffee that had already gone cold, waiting for the delay board to update. She was sitting one seat over, and when she dropped everything, her bag, her phone, her boarding pass, I picked it up. That's all. I handed it back without looking. Except I did look, just for a second, because the name on it was the same name on the door of the corner office on the 14th floor of Alderton Capital. I'm Declan Hurst. I've been a financial analyst at Alderton Capital for 2 years, and I want to make it clear from the start that I am not someone who makes reckless decisions. My mother raised me in Lethbridge to be careful. She worked 30 years as a school administrator, and she always said the same thing. The way you handle small moments tells people everything about who you are. I thought about her a lot that night. It was a Tuesday in January, which is already a bad time to be at an airport. The storm had come in from the mountains faster than anyone predicted, and by 6 o'clock every screen in the terminal was showing the same word, delayed. My flight to Toronto for the Q1 client meetings was pushed to 11, maybe midnight, maybe morning. The gate agent said it with the particular flatness of someone who had already said it 40 times that day. I went back to my seat with another coffee, and noticed the woman beside me was not handling it well. She wasn't crying, but she was close. She had her knees pulled up, her jacket wrapped around herself even though the terminal was warm, and she was staring at her phone with the expression of someone waiting for a call they weren't sure was coming. She was maybe 25, 26, dark hair. She'd been polished earlier. I could tell, the kind of put together that takes effort, but the delay had worn it off, and now she just looked tired and a little bit lost. I didn't say anything for a while. Then she ordered a glass of wine from the terminal bar cart that came around, and then another, and at some point she fell asleep sitting up, which is a kind of trust that only happens when you're truly exhausted. Her phone buzzed twice and she didn't wake up. Her boarding pass slipped out of her jacket pocket and landed on the floor between us. I picked it up. I was going to set it on the seat beside her. That's when I saw the name, Nadia Alderton. My boss's last name is Harold Alderton. He founded the firm in 2003. His name is on the letterhead, on the building directory, on the small plaque outside the corner office where I have had exactly 4 meetings, each one making me feel like I was defending a thesis. I sat very still for a moment. She wasn't wearing a company badge. She had no reason to know who I was. The rational thing, the thing my mother would have approved of, was to do exactly what any decent person would do when a stranger falls asleep in an airport. I put her boarding pass on the armrest beside her. I checked the departure board, still delayed. I drank my cold coffee, and I did not think too hard about the fact that I was now sitting 3 inches away from someone whose father could determine the entire trajectory of my career. The announcement came at 8:40. The flight was canceled. Not delayed anymore. Canceled. The gate area came alive in a way that only happens in airports. Everyone suddenly moving, pulling out phones, getting in line, talking too loudly. I stood up and started looking at the rebooking options on my app. The next available flight to Toronto was Thursday morning. I had meetings starting Wednesday at 9. The woman beside me, Nadia, woke up when the announcement came. She sat up, looked around, looked at her phone, and went completely still in the way that people do when they realize they've lost track of time and things have become complicated. "What happened?" she said, not to me specifically, just to the air. "Flight's canceled," I said. "Storm." She looked at the departure board for a long moment. Then she looked at her phone again and I could see the screen, not the contents, just the number of missed messages. There were 11. "Okay," she said. She said it the way people say okay when they mean the opposite. She stood up and her legs weren't quite steady. She'd had 2 glasses of wine on an empty stomach, I was guessing, and she'd just woken up from a sideways airport nap, and she was trying to put her jacket on and find her bag and look at her phone all at the same time. I steadied her elbow once, just briefly, when she listed sideways into the row of seats. "Sorry," she said.
"It's nice,"
I said. We ended up in the same rebooking line, which wasn't a coincidence, since there was only one rebooking line and it stretched back to the food court. We stood there for 40 minutes. She didn't say much. At some point she tried to call someone and the call didn't connect, and she put the phone back in her pocket with the careful precision of someone trying not to show that they're frustrated. By the time we got to the desk, the hotel voucher situation was grim. The airline had already distributed most of them. The agent told us there were rooms at a hotel near the airport, but the shuttle only fit 6 people, and there were 12 people in line, ahead of us. I called 3 hotels on the Drive app while we were still standing there. 2 were full. 1 had a single room available, which wasn't helpful. Then I remembered that my cousin Alec lived 20 minutes from the airport in a house with a finished basement that he rented out on weekends. I texted him and he replied in under a minute, the way he always does because he works nights at a distribution center and is always awake. Basement is free, come whenever. I looked at the woman beside me. I looked at the departure board. I thought about my mother. I have a place I can stay, I said. My cousin's house. It's not fancy, but it's close. If you need somewhere to wait out the storm, you're welcome to the couch. He won't mind. I paused. I want to be clear, I'm not trying to. This is just a practical offer. You don't have to. She looked at me for a moment. Long enough that I thought she was going to say no, and I was already preparing to nod and walk away. I'm Nadia, she said. Declan, I said. She picked up her bag. Alec's house was a semi-detached in the northeast end of Calgary. Nothing special, but warm and clean, and smelling like the chili he'd apparently made that evening. He met us at the door in a Flames jersey, and didn't make a single thing weird about the fact that I'd arrived with a stranger. That's the thing about Alec. He's been my cousin for 32 years, and he has never once asked an unnecessary question. He showed Nadia the couch in the living room, which had a proper pillow and 2 blankets already set out, and he pointed me toward the basement, where there was a pullout that I'd slept on more than once during hockey playoffs. There's chili in the pot if you're hungry, he said, and then went back to his night shift paperwork at the kitchen table. Nadia ate a bowl of chili. I made tea. We sat at the kitchen table after Alec went to the back room to make calls, and we talked for maybe 40 minutes, which doesn't sound like much but felt like more. She didn't tell me her last name again. She didn't need to. I already knew it. But she talked about Toronto, where she'd been living for the past 8 months working in acquisitions for a company she described as a firm my family has connections to, which is a careful way to say something. She talked about the weather in Calgary growing up, how she missed the mountains in a way that Toronto's skyline couldn't fix. She talked about her brother, who was apparently terrible at texting. She talked about the flight and how she'd had the 2 glasses of wine because she hated flying, which explained the otherwise out-of-place airport drinking. I didn't talk much. I asked questions. I'm better at listening than most people I know, which is a useful quality in finance and also, I've found, in most other situations. At some point I said I should let her sleep, because it was nearly midnight and the flight was early. She looked up at me and said, "You've been very kind." It wasn't a flirtatious thing. It was a serious thing the way she said it, like she meant it specifically. "Sleep well," I said, and I went downstairs. I did not sleep particularly well, for reasons that should be obvious. I lay on the pullout in Alec's basement and thought about what would happen when we got to the airport, and what would happen at the rebooking desk, and what would happen if somehow, through some chain of events I couldn't predict, Harold Alderton found out that his daughter had slept on his employee's cousin's couch in northeast Calgary. I thought about my mother again. She would have said I did the right thing. She also would have said it doesn't always matter whether you did the right thing or not. Both of those can be true. In the morning, Alec made eggs. Nadia helped with toast. There was a kind of easy domesticity to it that I didn't quite know what to do with. She'd borrowed one of Alec's clean t-shirts to sleep in, and her hair was down, and she looked like a completely different person from the polished woman I'd met at the gate. Not worse, just different, more real. We took the airport shuttle together. We went through security separately because we were in different lines. By the time I got to the gate, she was already there, and she waved when she saw me, which was a small thing that I noticed. On the plane, she was 4 rows ahead. I didn't try to change seats, and I don't think she expected me to. That wasn't what the night had been. I landed in Toronto at noon. I went to my hotel and changed and made the 2:30 meeting, which was the only one that mattered that day. The rest of the week happened the way those weeks do, back-to-back days, client dinners, spreadsheets on a hotel desk, the particular loneliness of a city you're in for work. I didn't think about Nadia Alderton every day. I thought about her on the plane home, and again when I was walking into the office on Monday morning and saw the name on the building directory, the way I always see it but don't always think about. 3 weeks later, she walked into the Alderton Capital offices. I found out about it the way you find out about things at a company like ours. Someone mentions it in passing in the kitchen. My colleague Patrick said, "Alderton's daughter is in town, apparently starting some kind of internal project, And then he refilled his coffee and kept talking about the Canucks game, and I just stood there for a moment holding my own cup. I saw her from across the floor that afternoon. She was with Harold and two of the senior partners, walking the space in that way that means someone is being evaluated or introduced or both. She had her hair up and she was in a navy blazer, and she looked exactly like someone who belongs in a corner office, which was not a surprise given the last name. She didn't see me. I went back to my desk and did my work. It was 2 days later on a Wednesday when she appeared at my desk. I didn't notice her coming. I was looking at a model on my second monitor and she simply appeared in my peripheral vision, standing at the edge of my desk with her hands clasped in a way that looked carefully casual. "Declan," she said. I turned around. There's a particular silence that happens when a situation becomes more complex than it was a moment ago. I experienced that silence for approximately 2 seconds. "Nadia," I said. She smiled just a little. "I wasn't sure you'd be here. I work here," I said. "I know," she said. "I found out after." She looked down briefly. "I'm sorry if that's uncomfortable. I thought about it. Is it for you?" She looked at me directly and said, "Not really," and then I wanted to say thank you again, properly. "Alex chili was genuinely good and I didn't get a chance to tell you that your cousin seems like a good person." I said Alec would be glad to hear it. She asked if I wanted to have lunch. Not dinner, lunch. In the office cafeteria in broad daylight, with people from the company at every surrounding table. Which is its own kind of message. I said yes. We ate sandwiches from the deli on the second floor and talked for an hour, mostly about work. She was leading an internal review of a community development portfolio Alderton had acquired 2 years ago, and she was asking smart questions and clearly knew what she was doing. She had an MBA from Western, which she mentioned once and didn't mention again. She had the particular confidence of someone who's been underestimated enough times to stop trying to preempt it. Word got around, because it always does. The person who got there first was a senior associate named Braddock, Julian Braddock, who had been at the firm for 5 years and had spent most of them acting like seniority was a birthright. I'd had a run-in with Julian during my first 6 months over a client file I'd flagged with it turned out to be his error. He'd been polite about it to my face and less polite about it in other rooms, and since then there had been a particular professional distance between us that suited both of us fine. Julian apparently saw Nadia and me at lunch. That afternoon he stopped by my desk with the specific energy of someone who thinks they're doing you a favor. "Careful, Hurst," he said, keeping his voice low and almost friendly. "Fraternizing with management family tends to read as ambitious in a way that doesn't always land well." He paused. "Just a heads up," collegially. I thanked him for the heads up. He nodded satisfied and walked away. I thought about whether he was right. I thought about it seriously, the way you have to when someone says something that might be true, even if their reasons for saying it are bad. And then I thought about Nadia asking smart questions about the community development portfolio, and the way she'd said not really when I asked if the situation was uncomfortable, and I decided that Julian Braddock's reading of things was not the reading I was going to build my decisions around. The next few weeks were ordinary and not ordinary. Nadia was on the same floor. We talked in the kitchen sometimes, the way coworkers do. We had lunch twice more. I helped her understand one aspect of the portfolio review that involved some legacy accounting software I happen to know, and she helped me think through a client presentation structure by asking 3 questions that completely changed how I was framing it. That kind of collaboration, where you both end up clearer on something, doesn't happen as often as you'd think in offices. Julian kept making small remarks. Nothing you could take to HR. The kind of thing that's technically within the lines and lands just outside them. He referenced the airport thing once. I didn't know how he'd found out, but Calgary is a smaller city than it seems, and he had a way of finding out things. And he said, in front of 2 other colleagues, "Heard you were quite the knight in shining armor in YYC in January," with a particular emphasis that made the whole table go quiet for a moment. Nadia was not at that table, but she heard about it. She mentioned it to me the next morning briefly and I told her it was nothing. "It's not nothing," she said. "Julian has been doing that thing he does for years and everyone around here lets it go because his father plays golf with 2 of the senior partners." I said I was aware. She looked at me for a moment. "My father isn't like that," she said. "I want you to know that." I didn't say anything because I wasn't sure what to say, and she moved on, and I thought about what she'd said for the rest of the day. The client event happened in late March, One of those quarterly receptions at a hotel ballroom downtown, where everyone is professionally pleasant and the salmon is always slightly overcooked. I was there because I'd been added to the client team for a new account. Nadia was there because she was still leading the portfolio review and her father had asked her to attend. Julian was also there, which was fine because it was a company event and he had every right to be. What was not fine was what he did at 8:15. He got Harold Alderton's attention near the bar. I saw this from across the room and said something. I couldn't hear it, but I saw Harold's expression change. And then Harold looked across the room, and his eyes found me, and they stayed there for a moment. Nadia saw it too. She was near me when it happened, and I watched her go very still in the way that means she was processing something and deciding what to do with it. Harold Alderton came over to us 5 minutes later. He was a tall man, 62 years old, who had the unhurried manner of someone who has never needed to rush anything because things tend to move when he walks toward them. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't read, and then at Nadia, and then back at me. Julian tells me the two of you have a history that predates the firm, Harold said. It wasn't a question exactly. I looked at him directly. I helped your daughter find a safe place to stay during the airport closure in January, I said, at my cousin's house. That's the full extent of it. Harold was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Julian characterized it differently. I imagine he did, I said. Another silence. Nadia was standing beside me and I could feel that she was not going to speak yet. She was waiting to see what her father did with this, which I understood. Harold Alderton looked at me for a long time, the kind of look that is actually an evaluation. Nadia, he said finally, did this young man behave appropriately? She didn't hesitate. He went out of his way to help a stranger in a difficult situation, she said. And the next morning his cousin made eggs. Harold looked at her, then he looked at me. Something in his expression shifted, not softened, exactly, but settled. All right, he said. He picked up his drink from a passing tray. Declan Hurst, was it? Yes, sir. Your Q1 analysis on the Patterson file was well constructed, he said, which was how Harold Alderton apparently acknowledged something. He turned and walked back toward the senior partners. I breathed out slowly. Julian left the event early. I noticed, because you notice things like that. The next morning he called in sick and was absent for 2 days. When he came back, the particular quality of his presence around me had changed, not gone, but quieter, in the way that happens when someone has misjudged the situation they thought they were managing. It came out later, gradually and through the usual channels, that Julian had made similar moves before, the low-grade undermining, the strategic mentions to senior people, the use of social proximity to position himself at others' expense. In a larger firm it might have gone on longer. Alderton Capital was 45 people on 2 floors, and Harold Alderton had built it himself and was not, as it turned out, someone who confused loyalty with tolerance. Julian left the firm in April. The official reason was a mutual agreement about future direction. Nobody said anything directly about the reception. These things rarely end with direct statements. Nadia finished the portfolio review in early May. It was a good piece of work. She recommended reallocating 2 underperforming assets and restructuring a third, and Harold accepted the recommendations in full, which people on the floor took note of because it was the first time in recent memory that a recommendation had been accepted that quickly. On her last day before returning to Toronto, she stopped by my desk at 4:30. I wanted to say goodbye properly, she said. I said that seemed fair, given that the first one had been at a security checkpoint. She smiled. It was a good smile, the real version, not the professional one. I'm going to be in Calgary more regularly, she said. The portfolio work continues remotely for now, but there'll be quarterly visits. She paused. I was thinking if you wanted we could have dinner next time, not lunch in the cafeteria. I thought about the airport in January, the boarding pass on the floor, the name I wasn't trying to see, 2 glasses of wine and a cancelled flight in Chile at midnight, and my cousin asking no unnecessary questions. I said I'd like that. She picked up her bag. Tell Alec he makes good chili, she said, and she walked toward the elevator. I turned back to my desk, to the model on the second monitor, to the particular and ordinary shape of an afternoon, at the end of a long stretch of weeks, that had turned out to be more than they looked like from the outside. Outside the window the mountains were still there, the way they always are in Calgary, white-capped in May, not going anywhere. I pulled up a new file. I started working. The day kept going.